Good morning, students. In previous class, we saw about the bacterial infection. In today's class, I'm going to talk about the viral infection. In that, our topic for today's class is the one of the infection that is caused by human herpes virus, which is herpes simplex. We'll see in detail about it. Human herpes virus. The term herpes comes from the ancient Greek word meaning to creep or crawl. The human herpes virus family is officially known as Herpetovirdae, and its best known member is herpes simplex virus, and it is a DNA virus. Two types of herpes simplex virus are known to exist. They are type 1 and type 2. Type 1 can be herpes simplex virus 1 and type 2 can be herpes simplex virus 2, and they can be called as HHV1 and HHV2. The other members of HHV family includes varicella zoster virus, that is HHV3, Epstein-Barr virus, that is HHV4, cytomegalovirus, that is HHV5, human herpes virus 6 and 7, and Kaposi sarcoma herpes virus, that is HHV8. Herpes simplex virus is an acute infection disease. Is probably the most common viral disease affecting man, with exception of viral respiratory infection. The tissue preferentially involved by the herpes simplex virus, often referred to as herpes virus hominis, and it is derived from the ectoderm and consists principally of skin, mucous membrane, eyes, and CNS. Herpes simplex virus composed of double-stranded DNA, protein capsid, and lipid envelope, which contain glycoprotein derived from the nuclear membrane of the host cell. There are two immunologically different types of HSV. They are type 1 and type 2 HSV. They differ antigenically and biologically but share 50% of nucleotide sequence. The incubation period is 1 to 26 days and can occur throughout the year. The transmission is mainly through a close contact or while sharing things. Herpes simplex virus type 1 is spread predominantly through the infected saliva or active perioral lesion. HSV1 is adapted best and perform more efficiently in the oral, facial, and ocular areas. The pharynx, the intraoral site, lip, eyes, and the skin above the waist are involved more frequently. HSV2 is adapted best to the genital zones, and it is transmitted predominantly through the sexual contact, and it is typically involves the genitalia and skin below the waist. The virus reaches the nerve ganglia supplying the affected area along the nerve pathway and remains latent there until it is reactivated. The usual ganglia involvement are trigeminal for HSV1 and lumbosacral for HSV2. Utilizing the culture technique, HSV1 could be isolated in a mean duration of 3.5 days with a range of 2 to 6 days after onset of lesion, while HSV2 for a mean duration of 5.5 days with a range of 2 to 14 days after onset. Now we'll see the pathogenesis of herpes simplex virus. The mucosal surface and the abraded skin favors the entry of virus and initiation of replication in the cell of epidermis and dermis. The initial or primary infection is asymptomatic and occurs commonly in childhood. Once the virus gains its entry, it enters into sensory autonomic nerve ending and remains latent in the ganglion. The virus replication occurs and spreads to the other skin and mucosal surface by a centrifugal distribution of virus through peripheral nerves. This way of spread is responsible for wider and larger surface area involved and greater frequency of new lesions. The disease manifests as a characteristic vesicles containing desquamated cells, multinucleated giant cells, and free virus with edema fluid. The primary infection resolves and virus can no longer be recovered from the ganglia, but viral DNA can be found in ganglion cells. The immunocompromised individual with impaired cellular immunity are more prone for recurrence of primary disease. Now we'll see about herpes genitalis. Herpes genitalis is caused by HSV2 and it is relatively common disease of uterine, cervix, vagina, vulva and penis. It is transmitted through sexual contact. The type 2 virus is more virulent than type 1 and has been associated repeatedly with carcinoma of uterine cervix. The herpetic meningoencephalitis is a serious form of this infection and it is characterized by a sudden fever and symptoms of increased intracranial pressure. The paralysis of various muscle groups, convulsion and even death may occur. It is difficult to differentiate clinically between meningoencephalitis caused by herpes virus and that produced by the other virus. Now we'll see about herpetic conjunctivitis or keratoconjunctivitis. It is another common disease and it is characterized by swelling and congestion of palpebral conjunctiva, keratitis and corneal ulceration may also occur. The herpetic vesicles of the eyelids are typical and these eye lesions are usually healed rapidly. Now we'll see about herpetic eczema. It can be otherwise called as Kaposi varicella eruption. It is an epidermal form of herpetic infection superimposed upon a pre-existing eczema and it is characterized by a diffuse vesicular lesion of skin which is usually and extremely serious in nature. In addition to this, atopic dermatitis, the herpetic infection may also superimpose on Darius disease and pemphigus vulgaris. It is the most frequently due to the primary herpetic attack and may be fatal. The patient usually children exhibiting high fever with typical umbilicated vesicle. Disseminated herpes simplex of newborn. It is relatively uncommon disease in which the newborn infant acquires the infection during passage through the birth canal of a mother who is suffering from herpetic vulvovaginitis. These infants usually manifest the disease by the 4th to 7th day of life, exhibit a wide variety of signs and symptoms, and usually die on 9th to 12th day of life. The surviving infants frequently show a residual neurological involvement. Herpetic whitlow occurs in fingers due to autoinoculation, whereas the herpetic gladiatum occurs in wrestlers. Now we'll see about primary herpetic stomatitis. It is a common oral disease transmitted by droplet spread or contact with the lesion. It affects children and young adults and it is frequently a primary attack. The primary attack is characterized by fever, irritability, headache, pain upon swallowing and regional lymphadenopathy. Within few days, the mouth becomes painful and the gingiva, which is intensely inflamed, appears erythematous and edematous. The lip, tongue, buccal mucosa, palate, pharynx and tonsils may be involved. Shortly, the yellowish fluid-filled vesicle will develop. These ruptures and forms a shallow, ragged, extremely painful ulcer covered by a grey membrane and surrounded by a erythematous hollow. The ulcer may vary in size. It heals spontaneously within 7 to 14 days and leave no scar. Now we'll see the histopathological features. The herpetic vesicle is an intraepithelial blister filled with fluid. The infected cells are swollen and have pale eosinophilic cytoplasm and large vesicular nucleus described as ballooning degeneration, while other characteristically containing intranuclear inclusion bodies known as Lipschutz bodies. These Lipschutz bodies are eosinophilic ovoid homogeneous structure within the nucleus which tend to displace the nucleolus and the nuclear chromatin peripherally. The displacement of chromatin often produces a peri-inclusion halo. The cytoplasm of the infected cells form a giant cells. The adjacent connective tissue is usually infiltrated with inflammatory cells. When the vesicle ruptures, the surface of the tissue covered by exudate made up of fibrin and polymorphonuclear leukocytes and degenerated cells. The lesion heals by peripheral epithelial proliferation. So you can able to see a histopathological picture in the slide, and it shows an intraepithelial blisters filled with the fluid. So in histopathology, the fluid will go off and there will be a cleft formation will be seen. So histopathologically you can able to see an intraepithelial cleft. The same type of intraepithelial cleft you will see in case of an pemphigus vulgaris also. Okay, so this is a one of an important finding of an primary herpetic stomatitis. So in this slide you can see in histopathological picture. So the picture shows you the ballooning degeneration of cells. So inside the ballooning degeneration of cells you can see an intranuclear inclusion body. So the black arrow indicates the intranuclear inclusion bodies. So they are usually ovoid in shape and eosinophilic in nature. So we will term that as an Lipschutz bodies. Now we'll move on to the diagnostic methods. It can be diagnosed both clinically as well as by a laboratory procedures. Scraping obtained from the base of the lesion are usually stained using Wright and the Giemsa stain. The PAP stain demonstrates the balloon cells, multinucleated giant cells, and intranuclear inclusion bodies. But the most sensitive and the accurate method for diagnosing the lesion is PCR technique. Moving on to the treatment, antiviral drugs have a significant impact on the course of the disease if it is diagnosed early. The antibiotic therapy helps in the prevention of secondary infections. NSAIDs and the topical anesthetics may relieve the discomfort considerably. Latency is a state in viral infection in which the viral genome is present in non-replicating stage in an infected cell but can become an active intermittently. Establishment of latency is contributed by host factors like neurons, IgG, CD8 cytotoxic lymphocytes, cytokines, and viral factors includes downregulation of alpha gene expression and DNA replication. Latent stage is maintained by viral genes expressed primarily during latency. Expression of these latency-associated genes may function to keep the viral genome from being digested by cellular ribosomes or being found out by the immune system. Now we'll see about recurrent herpetic labialis. It is otherwise called as secondary herpetic labialis or recurrent herpetic stomatitis or secondary herpetic stomatitis. It is usually seen in adult patients and manifests clinically as an attenuated form of primary disease. Those without HSV1 and HSV2 circulating antibodies are at high risk of contact and infection. The precipitating factor includes trauma, fatigue, menstruation, pregnancy, upper respiratory tract infection, emotional upset, allergy, exposed to sunlight or ultraviolet lamps, or gastrointestinal disturbances. The viruses, once they have been introduced into the body, appears reside dormantly within the regional ganglion, and when activated is triggered, it spread along the nerves to site on the oral mucosa and skin, where they destroy the epithelial cells and induce typical inflammatory response with the characteristic lesion of recurrent infection. Now we'll see the clinical features. The lesion may develop either at the site of primary inoculation or in the adjacent area supplied by the involved ganglion. It may develop on the lips or intraorally. If it occurs in the lips, we will term it as a recurrent herpes labialis. On lips, these ruptured vesicles become covered by a brownish crust. The most common site for recurrent intraoral herpetic lesions are hard palate, attached gingiva, and alveolar ridge. In either location, these lesions are frequently preceded by burning sensation or tingling sensation. There will be a feeling of tautness, swelling, or slight soreness at the location in which the vesicle subsequently develops. These vesicles are generally small and tend to occur in localized clusters and may coalesce to form large lesions. These gray or white vesicle ruptures quickly, leaving a small red ulceration, sometimes with slight erythematous hollow. These lesion gradually heals within 7 to 10 days and leave no scar. This picture is a clinical picture of an herpes labialis. So on the lips you can able to see some ruptured vesicles which are covered by a brownish crust. So this is a classic clinical finding of an herpes labialis. Now we'll see the cytological finding. The Papa-Nicolau smear using a fresh scraping from the base of the vesicle is the reliable technique for recurrent herpetic labialis. There will be a presence of ballooning degeneration will be seen. Chromatin marginations will be present. Atypical lip shoots bodies will be seen, as well as there will be a presence of Zang cells is seen in a recurrent herpetic labialis. The same type of Zang cells you will be seen in case of an pemphigus vulgaris also. So moving on to the histopathological features, in histopathology there will be a squamous mucosa with an acantholytic cells will be present, as you see in case of an pemphigus vulgaris. There will be a margination of nuclear chromatin will be seen. There will be a few areas showing an multinucleated giant cells, and as well as the viral inclusion bodies will be seen. Now we'll see the laboratory findings. The virus is easily isolated when there is a production of gamma A globulin. The current diagnostic method for herpes viral diagnosis have been reviewed by Burns, and he have included the viral inoculation and identification, immunofluorescent staining of smears, immunoperoxidase technique, serological assay such as a complement fixation assay, radioimmunoassay, and an enzyme-linked immunoassay. Now we'll see the treatment aspect. The most prominent antiviral drugs for HSV infections are viradabin, edoxyuridine, and acyclovir. So there are few doubts have been asked in the previous class. We'll see one by one. First doubt is about the histopathological features of NOMA. See, this is a clinical picture of a NOMA patient. See, usually the NOMA, if you take histopathology and the C also, there will be a more of a necrotic area only. So there is a more amount of necrosis and sloughing of tissue is happening in case of NOMA. So there is no need of an histopathology for NOMA. So the second doubt is about the histopathological picture of actinomycosis, and this is the lower magnification of actinomycosis. It demonstrates a connective tissue component, a dense connective tissue. Centrally, you can able to see a radiating rosette type of pattern with an hematoxylin and eosin stain. The central core, which is stained by hematoxylin, whereas the peripheral area is stained by eosin. That gives you appearance of a ray fungus appearance. So that arrow indicates the ray fungus appearance. I think we can able to understand this explanation now. The next doubt is about garment in. Actually, it is not a doubt. Actually, it is a Viva question to me. Uh, Two of your batchmates have asked what is the garment nevi and why it is called so. This was the question they have asked me. I'm ready to answer your question. So it is otherwise called as giant congenital melanotic nevus, or it can be otherwise called as bathing trunk nevus, or it can be called as giant hairy nevus. It is defined by one or more large darkly pigmented and sometimes hairy patches. So you can see a picture in the slide that shows you the a giant congenital melanotic nevus picture, and you can see a darkly pigmented macular lesion over the patient. So or darkly pigmented lesion நீங்க பார்க்குறீங்க. So the diameter of the lesion will be more than 20 centimeters. So usually the size will be over 20 centimeters in size, and usually this lesion will be present at birth, and there will be a presence of terminal hairs over the period of time. So these are all the clinical findings of a garment nevus. And the second part of the doubt is why it is called so. With this picture itself you can able to understand why it is called so. பார்க்கறதுக்கு ஏதோ ஒரு ட்ரெஸ் போட்டிருக்கிற மாதிரி, ஒரு கார்மெண்ட் அணிஞ்சிருக்கிற மாதிரி ஒரு ஒரு அப்பியரன்ஸ் தரதுனால தான் இதுக்கு வந்து ஒரு கார்மெண்ட் நீவைன்னு சொல்லி நேம் கொடுத்துருக்குறாங்க. ஸோ அதுக்கு தான் இந்த பிக்சரை நான் போட்டிருக்கிறேன். பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஏதோ அந்த குழந்தை வந்து ஏதோ ட்ரெஸ் போட்டிருக்கிற மாதிரி ஒரு அப்பியரன்ஸ் கொடுக்குது. ஸோ ஸோ தட்ஸ் வை இட் இஸ் கால்ட் அஸ் கார்மெண்ட் நீவை. I hope you understand about garment நீவை right now. And ரெண்டு பேர் கேட்டிருக்கீங்க இந்த கொஸ்டின் கார்மெண்ட் நீவைனா என்னன்னா, வெதர் உங்களுக்கு ரெண்டு பேரோட டவுட்டா இல்லை காப்பி அடிக்கும் போது கூகுள் ஃபார்மில் காப்பி அடிக்கும் போது அப்படியே கட் காப்பி பேஸ்ட் பண்ணிட்டீங்களான்னு தெரியல. ஓகே, வாட் எவர் இட் மேட் பி, இட்ஸ் ஃபைன். ஓகே, ஸோ ஐ ஹோப் யூ அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் அபவுட் கார்மெண்ட் நீவை ரைட் நவ். Moving on to the final doubt. The final doubt is about filamentous and hematoxylin and eosin. Sorry மா, டவுட் வந்து எனக்கு எக்ஸாக்டாக என்னன்றது புரியல. நீங்கள் திரும்பவும் கேட்டிங்கன்னா ஐ கேன் ஏபிள் டு ஆன்சர் யுவர் டவுட்டு. நிஜமாக எனக்கு புரியலம்மா. ஓகே, so that's all regarding the doubts of the last class. I hope I have cleared all your doubts. என்னம்மா இதான் நடந்துட்டு இருக்குது. ஒரு கிளாஸும் நானும் சின்சியராக கூகுள் ஃபார்ம் ஃபில் பண்ணுங்கன்னு சொல்லுவேன். நீங்கள் கரெக்டாக கூகுளை பார்த்து பர்ஃபெக்டாக ஃபில் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கீங்கன்னு தெரியும். உங்கள் ஆன்சரை வச்சே தெரியும் கிளாஸ் பார்த்து ஃபில் பண்ணுறீங்களா இல்லை கூகுளை பார்த்து ஃபில் பண்ணுறீங்களான்னு தெரியும். பட் வாட் எவர் யூ ஆர் சர்ச்சிங் இன் கூகுள் ஆர் கிளாஸை கவனித்து ஃபில் பண்ணாலும் இட்ஸ் வெரி ஃபைன் டு மீ, நோ ப்ராப்ளம். பட் கூகுள்னாலும் சரி இல்லை கிளாஸ்னாலும் சரி, பட் சிலர் வந்து என்ன பண்ணுறீங்கன்னா இன்னொருத்தங்க ஆன்சர் அப்படியே காப்பி பேஸ்ட் பண்ணுறீங்க. அதை கொஞ்சம் அவாய்ட் பண்ணிங்கன்னா பரவாயில்ல. தென் இட்ஸ் அப் டு யூ. ஓகே, ஸோ எப்படியோ ஒன்று. ஸோ இன்றைக்கும் வந்து சொல்கிறது என்னென்னா சின்சியராக கூகுள் ஃபார்மை ஃபில் பண்ணுங்க. ஓகே, to conclude today's class, we saw about the human herpes virus and its type. In that we saw about herpes simplex infection, which is caused by HSV1 and HSV2. HSV1 causes oral infection, whereas HSV2 causes genital infection. Then we have seen about the pathogenesis of herpes simplex infection. Next we saw about the various types of herpes simplex infections. After that we saw about the primary herpetic stomatitis. Then we move on to its histopathological features. In that we saw an important histopathological finding, that is the Lipschutz bodies we have seen. After that we saw about the latency. Then we move on to the secondary herpetic stomatitis, which is otherwise called as a recurrent herpetic stomatitis or labialis. In its clinical features, we saw a recurrent herpetic labialis where there will be a rupture of vesicle followed by a brownish crust appearance will be seen. Then we saw about the cytological features of recurrent herpetic stomatitis. In that ballooning degeneration we saw, as well as Zang cells will be present in cytology. Then we saw the histopathological features. In that you will be seeing an acantholysis and some area shows the Zang cells. Then we move on to the diagnostic part and the treatment aspect of a recurrent herpetic stomatitis. I hope you understood my class today. Read about the the viral infection which I have taught you today. Okay, thank you, have a great day.